The missile is already in the air before the pilot even knows it was fired. No alarm, no warning light, no beep. Just a white streak climbing fast from a rooftop 2 miles below in 4 seconds to decide whether you live or die. That is where this story begins. And by the time it ends, you're going to understand exactly why the most expensive fighter jet in the Navy's fleet nearly got killed by a weapon that costs less than a used car. It is 9:09 in the morning over the Gulf of Oman. The water below is glassy and still. 2 A-18E Super Hornets slice northward at 25,000 feet, call signs Mustang 11 and Mustang 12. Their target is an ammunition storage depot at Bandar Abbas, and it is being emptied as they fly. Satellite imagery from the last orbital pass showed trucks lined up bumper to bumper, crews working under floodlights, loading anti-ship cruise missiles onto flatbeds and driving them north into the mountains. Every 60 seconds those jets stay in transit is another 60 seconds for weapons that could one day sink an American carrier to disappear permanently. The pilots know this. The pressure is absolute. What the pilots do not know is that somewhere in the rocky terrain directly ahead of them, an Iranian Kordad air defense battery is sitting in total silence. No emissions, no radar sweeps, nothing for the American sensors to detect. The crew inside that van hasn't moved in hours. They are watching their passive displays, hands inches from the activation switches, waiting. They have been told to hold until the Americans are inside 120 kilometers. At that range, the geometry becomes extremely difficult for a fast mover to escape. The invisible line gets crossed, and the Kordad crew throws the switch. The cockpit of Mustang 11 immediately erupts with the screech of the radar warning receiver. A bearing flashes on the display 340 degrees. The system identifies a phased array acquisition signal, and that distinction matters enormously. This is not the lazy, sweeping circular scan of an aging Soviet-era radar that broadcasts its presence to anyone within 100 miles. This is a disciplined, high-energy beam that locks and tracks with terrifying efficiency. It isn't searching the sky, it already found them, and now it is building the firing solution that will put a Sayed-3 missile on a collision course with a $70 million aircraft and the human being strapped inside it. Intelligence had written this battery off as non-operational, degraded, and ineffective. The analysts were catastrophically wrong. The air crews are now paying for that error in real time. Mustang 11 calls the threat on the tactical net, and the formation does not turn around. The mission parameters hold. The depot is still the priority. Coming in from behind the strike package is an EA-18G Growler, call sign Wizard 31. If you have never heard of the Growler before, here is what you need to understand. It shares the same airframe as the Super Hornet, same engines, same general shape, same outer mold line. But where the Hornets carry bombs and air-to-air missiles, the Growler carries something that can be far more decisive. It carries the ability to reach into the electromagnetic spectrum and destroy an enemy's ability to see, think, and communicate. It is a predator that kills without firing a single bullet, at least initially. Wizard 31 activates its ALQ-249 next-generation jamming pods, 3 of them, and what follows is difficult to overstate. Each one of those pods can saturate more frequency bands simultaneously than the entire Kordad system was engineered to cope with. The Iranian operator's screen, which a moment ago showed clean, crisp radar returns of the 2 Super Hornets, turns into an absolute wall of noise. It is the electronic equivalent of trying to read a text message with a fire hose aimed directly at your face. The signal drowns completely, but this operator has trained for exactly this moment. He does not panic. He does not shut down. He understands that the jamming is the last warning before a missile comes for his antenna, and he makes the decision that surprises the Americans. He narrows the beam. He focuses the entire energy output of his system into a single tight cone pointed at the last known position of the strike package, sacrificing his wide area search capability entirely. By doing this, he is essentially betting that brute force energy concentration can burn through the jamming on a single bearing, and it is working. The warning receiver in Mustang 11's cockpit, which had briefly quieted, starts screaming again. The fire control computer in the Iranian van is rebuilding the solution. The Sayed-3 needs 8 seconds of high-quality tracking data to commit to its intercept geometry. The clock shows 3 seconds remaining. Mustang 11 and 12 go defensive immediately. They begin a weaving sequence, shallow high-speed S turns designed to drag their radar cross-sections through the edges of the jamming energy and force the enemy computer to constantly recalculate. Every correction that computer has to make costs it time. Every fraction of a second costs the missile another meter of guidance accuracy. But weaving costs the Americans too. Every deviation pulls them off their planned ingress route. Every second of maneuvering is 30 meters of lateral drift that the navigation system will have to correct before weapons can be released. In contested airspace, there is no such thing as a free move. Wizard 31 fires an AGM-88E RGM. The advanced anti-radiation guided missile drops off the rail and accelerates toward the source of the radar emissions. This weapon is fundamentally different from the older versions, and the difference is what makes it lethal even against a trained operator. It rides the radar beam back to the antenna. It memorizes the GPS coordinates of that antenna. If the operator kills the power, the missile does not lose the target. It transitions to its own millimeter wave radar for the terminal phase. The moment the AARGM left the rail, the Iranian operator's only remaining option was to hope the missile somehow missed. Cutting the power was never going to save him. He cuts it anyway, 3 seconds too late. 40 seconds after launch, the warhead detonates, and the Kordad battery is gone. The victory lasts approximately 8 seconds. The jamming energy that Wizard 31 used to blind the Kordad has been radiating across every passive receiver in Hormozgan province. Every listening post, every intelligence van, every dormant system that was told to wait for exactly this kind of electronic signature now knows the precise bearing of the American strike package. 40 kilometers to the northwest, a system that has been powered down for 3 full days suddenly activates. A new threat symbol appears on Mustang 11's display, and it has a completely different character, more aggressive, more persistent. The computer spits out the identification almost immediately. Hawk. Already tracking, already 40 kilometers away, which means the engagement timeline is brutally compressed. Mustang 11 pushes the nose down and goes full throttle. He is trading altitude for speed, converting potential energy into kinetic energy, trying to create a rapidly changing geometric problem for the Hawk's fire control computer to solve. Mustang 12 mirrors without a word. The altimeters unwind with a velocity that is physically uncomfortable to watch. 20,000 feet, 18,000, 15,000. The pilots level at 12,000. They have survived the dive, but the mission math is now significantly worse. Here's what makes this Hawk threat particularly dangerous. The systems Iran is operating are not the vintage 1960s American-supplied versions from before the revolution. Over 4 decades of embargo, reverse engineering, and help from outside sources, Iran has rebuilt and modernized these systems to a degree that would be unrecognizable to the original engineers. The seekers are digital. The electronic components operate on frequency bands the original American software was never designed to handle. When Wizard 31's pods were tuned to defeat the Kordad, they were essentially tuned to one radio station. The Hawk operates on a completely different one. Reconfiguring the ALQ-249 takes time, and in the world of missile defense, time is measured in the lives of aircrew. The Hawk fires 2 missiles. Both are tracking the reflected radar energy bouncing off the Super Hornets' airframes. The illuminator on the ground is lighting them up like a spotlight in a dark theater, and the missiles are simply chasing the light. Standard doctrine against an active radar seeker is to split the formation, force the seeker to choose, dilute its targeting logic. But this is a semi-active system. Split the formation and one aircraft might escape the beam while both missiles concentrate on the remaining one. Mustang 11 and 12 make the correct call and stay tight, compressing their combined radar signature and preparing to seed the air with chaff. Both pilots trigger their ALE-47 dispensers. Thousands of metallic strips bloom into the slipstream, a cloud of reflective material that presents the Hawk's seeker with what appears to be a cluster of full-sized fighter aircraft. Mustang 12's dispenser fires perfectly, a textbook decoy cloud. Mustang 11's dispenser jams. 2 of the 6 cartridges fail to eject. The pilot hears the sound that every aviator dreads, a muffled mechanical thunk instead of the rapid series of pops that signals a clean deployment. His chaff cloud is thin, small, and it dissipates fast. The first Hawk missile chases the larger return from Mustang 12's chaff and detonates harmlessly 200 meters behind him. The second missile ignores Mustang 11's inadequate decoy and stays locked. The pilot can see the white contrail through his canopy. He rolls hard and pulls the exhaust plumes out of the missile's tracking plane, dropping from 12,000 to 10,000 feet in 2 seconds. This violent geometry shift drags the Hawk's illuminator beam across the edge of the chaff cloud at exactly the moment Wizard 31 finishes reconfiguring for the new frequency band. The jamming locks in, the seeker goes blind, the missile goes ballistic and impacts the water. Wizard 31 puts the last AARGM into the Hawk battery. The system that Iran spent decades building and refining is now a smoking hole in the ground, killed by a missile that costs less than a suburban house. The math is genuinely remarkable. But look at what the Americans have spent to get here. Wizard 31 is completely out of anti-radiation missiles. If another radar comes up between here and the target, the only tools remaining are electronic jamming and maneuvering. The evasive dive burned fuel at a rate that would have seemed abstract on a mission planning chart, but is very real now on the fuel gauge. The WSO in Mustang 12 runs the numbers, and the results are ugly. Returning to altitude puts them back in range of any long-range system they haven't found yet, and they now have nothing to shoot back with. Staying low uses terrain masking, lets the mountains shield them from radar. but low altitude at high speed in a heat-generating fighter aircraft is a fundamentally different kind of threat environment. At 4,000 feet, they are inside the effective range of every man-portable missile system in the province. They choose low. The depot is 11 miles north, and it is still being emptied. At low altitude and high throttle, the F-414 engines are consuming fuel at a rate that would be alarming at a civilian gas pump. They are also producing a massive infrared signature in the cool morning air. To any heat-seeking sensor within 5 kilometers, the two Super Hornets look exactly like twin bonfires cutting through the dark, and here is the part that makes this genuinely troubling from a procurement standpoint. The most lethal threat these pilots will face in the next 4 minutes isn't a sophisticated radar system. It doesn't require a fire control computer or a satellite data link or a crew of trained specialists. It requires one person, one shoulder, and one missile that costs roughly as much as a used compact car. On a rooftop in the industrial zone south of the airport, a militia fighter shoulders a MASAG-2. It is an Iranian derivative of the Chinese QW-1B, a passive infrared seeker that emits absolutely nothing. No radar, no laser, no radio. It simply listens for heat. The fighter doesn't even need to see the jets clearly. He hears the engines first, lets the seeker tone confirm the lock, and fires. The pilot has zero warning. The ALR-67 radar warning receiver that saved them twice over the Gulf is completely silent because there is nothing electronic to detect. And the A-18E Super Hornet, despite its $70 million acquisition cost, does not have a missile approach warning system. The sensor that could detect the ultraviolet flash of a launch signature is standard equipment on the F-35. It is standard on the MQ-9 Reaper drone. It is absent here. That procurement gap, that specific line item budget decision made years earlier in an office building far from any combat zone, is the reason Mustang 11 is now flying blind against a weapon a teenager could operate. What saves him is chance. A 5-degree course correction toward the coastline swings the exhaust nozzles just far enough out of the MASAG-2's narrow tracking cone that the primitive guidance logic cannot adapt. The missile's seeker was designed for a steady tail chase. The geometry changed. It streaks past and self-destructs in open air. Mustang 12, half a mile behind, catches the flash of the detonation through the haze and calls out a possible launch. Mustang 11 checks every instrument, nothing. He asks for confirmation. Mustang 12 confirms it. The depot is still 11 miles away and still being emptied. 3 miles later, a second fighter on a warehouse roof has been listening to the engine noise for 30 seconds. He fires. This time Mustang 11 sees it. The white streak rising from his 2 o'clock position. He brakes hard into the launch and triggers his flare dispenser. The MJU-53 magnesium decoys ignite at 2,000 degrees as they tumble away from the jet, burning far hotter than the engine exhaust. The MASAG-2 seeker is forced to choose between the actual aircraft and a heat source that is orders of magnitude more intense. It chooses the flare. The proximity fuse triggers 40 meters behind the Hornet. The shockwave hits the airframe like a physical punch, a second of silence on the radio. Then Mustang 11 calls it, still flying. 2 MANPAD shots in 4 miles. The depot is 3 minutes away. The WSO runs the final fuel calculation, and the results are stark. They have enough fuel to make one pass, release their weapons, and make it to the tanker. There is no margin for a second run. There is no margin for another extended defensive maneuver. Every pound of fuel they burn staying alive is a pound they cannot use to fly home. The decision tree has collapsed to a single branch. They press north, accept the risk of whatever might be waiting in those final 3 minutes, and complete the mission. Because the alternative isn't a safe return to the carrier. The alternative is those trucks making it into the mountains with enough anti-ship munitions to threaten the entire fleet at a future date that no one can predict and no one can prevent. The math is brutal, and it is simple. That is the arithmetic of air combat, and it is never kind.